In the peaceful village of Ndimu, life moved slowly and gently. The sound of the river running behind the hills mixed with the songs of birds in the tall trees. The people of Ndimu were known for their kindness and respect for one another. They worked together in the fields, shared food during harvest, and helped each other in times of need. But among them lived a man named Kato, and Kato was different from the rest. Kato was a tall and strong man, with wide shoulders and a voice that carried across the village. He had been strong since he was a boy, and his strength made him proud. When he grew older, he began to think that strength meant power, and power meant control. He believed no one could tell him what to do. Kato liked to show off his strength at the marketplace, lifting heavy bags of grain with one arm while others struggled with two. When people praised him, his pride grew. But when anyone disagreed with him, anger filled his heart. He often shouted at the women in the village. If one of them spoke back to him, he called her names. If an elder advised him to calm down, he laughed and said, "I am a man. I fear no one." People began to avoid him. Children stopped playing near his home because they feared his loud voice. Even the animals seemed to stay away from his yard. Yet, deep inside, Kato was not as happy as he appeared. He had no close friends. When the people of Ndimu gathered in the evenings to tell stories by the fire, Kato stayed alone. Sometimes he sat outside his hut, watching the stars, wondering why others seemed at peace while he always felt restless. But instead of changing, he blamed others for his loneliness. He told himself that the villagers were weak, that they did not understand him. Kato lived in a small mud hut near the river. He had a small piece of land where he grew yams and maize, but he rarely asked for help. He liked to say he could do everything by himself. Still, the harvest never seemed enough, and his farm did not flourish like the others. The women who passed by on their way to fetch water would sometimes greet him kindly, but he would only grunt in reply. Some said that Kato's heart had become like a rock, hard and cold. One day, an elder named Baba Nuru visited him. Baba Nuru was a wise man, respected by all. He carried a walking stick and had a gentle voice. He said to Kato, "My son, strength is not in shouting or fighting. A true man protects, he does not harm." Kato laughed loudly. "You speak like the women," he said. "You are old and weak. How can you teach me about strength?" Baba Nuru looked at him sadly. "Then may the world teach you," he said quietly, and walked away. The next few days were filled with trouble for Kato. His crops began to dry under the hot sun. The rains that came to other farms skipped his land. He shouted at the sky, thinking it was unfair. He tried to fetch water from the river, but his calabash cracked. Still, he refused to ask anyone for help. The villagers watched in silence. They pitied him, but they also feared his temper. Kato's only comfort was his cow, Mala. She was a calm brown cow that gave milk every morning. But one night, Mala fell ill. Kato tried to treat her himself, using leaves and herbs he barely knew. By morning, the cow died. Kato sat beside her, angry and sad at the same time. He blamed fate, he blamed the spirits, but never himself. He did not see that his pride had left him alone with his pain. Days turned into weeks. Kato grew bitter. He walked through the village with a hard face, scaring anyone who looked at him. Children ran inside their huts when they saw him coming. One day, a young boy accidentally dropped a pot near Kato's feet, splashing water on his legs. Kato shouted so loudly that the boy ran away crying. The boy's mother came and tried to explain that it was only an accident, but Kato raised his hand as if to strike her. She stood still, her eyes full of fear, and he turned away with a snort. The villagers whispered about what had happened. Many said that Kato's heart was cursed with pride. One evening, the elders called a village meeting under the big baobab tree. Everyone came, even Kato. The chief spoke gently but firmly. "Kato," he said, "we are one family in Ndimu. We cannot live in peace while one among us spreads fear. You are strong, but you use your strength wrongly. Strength should build, not break." Kato crossed his arms. "I need no lesson from anyone," he said. "Let those who are weak hide behind words. I stand by my own power." The elders sighed, knowing he was not ready to listen. But even though Kato refused to admit it, the words stayed in his mind. That night, he could not sleep. He lay on his mat, hearing the crickets outside and thinking about what the chief had said. For the first time, he wondered if his strength truly made him powerful, or if it only made him lonely. As the days went by, Cato noticed how the people of Ndemu helped each other. When one man's hut was damaged by rain, the whole village came together to rebuild it. When a woman gave birth, everyone brought food and gifts. They laughed together, worked together, and lived as one. Cato watched them from a distance, feeling a strange emptiness in his chest. He wanted to join them, but his pride held him back. One morning, as he was fetching water from the river, he saw an old woman struggling to lift her calabash. She looked tired and weak. For a moment, Cato stood still, thinking it was not his problem. But then something moved inside him, a quiet voice he had never heard before. He walked to her and said, "Let me help you." The woman looked surprised but smiled and thanked him. He lifted the calabash easily and carried it to her hut. The villagers who saw this whispered to one another, amazed that Cato had helped someone. That night, as he sat outside his hut, Cato felt lighter. The stars looked brighter, and for the first time in many moons, he smiled. Still, he told himself it was only a small act. Yet deep inside, he knew it was the beginning of something different. He did not understand it fully, but he felt a small peace in his heart. The next morning, as he walked through the village, he greeted the people softly. Some returned his greeting with surprise, others with cautious smiles. The children still kept their distance, but they no longer ran away. Cato looked around and saw the beauty of his village, the green fields, the tall trees, the sound of laughter. He realized how much he had missed by closing his heart. Though Cato was still proud, something had changed. He had begun to see that there was more strength in kindness than in anger. The road ahead was long, and his heart still carried stubbornness, but a small seed of change had been planted. And like the crops he once failed to grow, that seed only needed time, care, and humility to bloom. One bright morning, the people of Ndemu saw a stranger walking along the dusty road that led into the village. She carried a small basket on her head and a bundle of cloth under her arm. Her steps were steady and calm, and her eyes were kind but sharp, like someone who had seen many places and learned much. Her name was Amina. She was a traveling trader and healer who moved from one village to another, selling herbs, roots, and colorful fabrics. Wherever she went, peace seemed to follow her. When Amina arrived in Ndemu, she greeted everyone she met with warmth. "Good morning, my brothers and sisters," she said with a smile that made even the shy children come closer. Her voice was soft, yet strong. The villagers quickly noticed that there was something different about her. She was not only beautiful but also wise. Her words carried meaning, and her laughter had a way of easing tired hearts. She set up her small stall near the marketplace under the shade of a big mango tree. On her mat, she laid out bottles filled with oils, baskets of dried herbs, and pieces of fine cloth she had woven herself. The women gathered around her, admiring her work. She told them about the plants she used for medicine, how one leaf could heal a wound, and how another could calm a fever. The men who passed by watched with respect as she spoke. Even the children sat close, listening to her stories about faraway places. In just a few days, Amina became loved by everyone. When someone was sick, they called for her before going to the old healer. When a mother had trouble with her child, Amina spoke softly to both and helped them find peace. The elders were pleased, saying the spirits had sent her to bless the village. But not everyone welcomed her. Cato, the stubborn man of Ndemu, heard the villagers talking about her. He was sitting outside his hut when a group of young men passed by, speaking with excitement. "Have you seen the new woman in the market?" one said. "She knows how to cure sickness and make oils that smell like flowers." Another added, "Even the chief went to buy her herbs." Cato frowned. "A woman who thinks she can heal the sick," he muttered. "What foolishness! These people will believe anything." He stood up and walked to the market, wanting to see for himself what kind of woman was gaining such attention. When he reached the mango tree, he saw Amina sitting on her mat, grinding leaves in a small clay bowl. Her hands moved with care, and she greeted each person kindly. Her calmness annoyed him. He folded his arms and watched for a while before stepping closer. "So, you are the new healer everyone is talking about?" Cato asked loudly. The people around turned to look. Amina looked up at him and smiled. "Yes, my name is Amina. How can I help you, brother?" Cato laughed. "Help me? No woman can help me. I only came to see what tricks you are using to fool these people." His words made the crowd uneasy. The women looked down, afraid that Cato's temper would rise again. But Amina did not look afraid. She looked straight at him and said softly, "There are no tricks here, only truth. Herbs do not lie, and kindness needs no strength to be felt." Cato's smile faded for a moment, but he quickly covered it with a smirk. "You speak well," he said, "but words are easy. Let's see if your wisdom can feed a family or lift a heavy sack of maize." Amina stood slowly and looked him in the eye. "A strong arm may lift a sack," she said, "but only a strong heart can lift a person." Her words hung in the air. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Cato felt something stir inside him, anger mixed with surprise. He was not used to being spoken to this way, especially by a woman. He wanted to shout, but the calmness in Amina's voice made it hard. He turned away with a snort and said, "We shall see how long your clever tongue keeps you in this village." Then he walked off, leaving behind a curious and whispering crowd. After that day, Amina's name spread even more. The people admired how she had stood up to Cato without fear. Some said she must have special wisdom, while others whispered that perhaps the spirits guided her. Children began to visit her in the evenings to hear her stories. She told them about distant lands where rivers were wide like seas and trees grew tall enough to touch the clouds. Her stories were full of lessons, about kindness, patience, and the strength that comes from understanding others. Meanwhile, Cato could not stop thinking about her. Her calm face kept appearing in his mind. He told himself he didn't care, but every time he passed the market, his eyes looked for her stall. He watched from a distance as she helped people and laughed with them. It made him angry that everyone loved her so quickly. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange feeling he had never known before: respect. One afternoon, Cato's neighbor, a young man named Sephew, came to ask for help. "Cato," he said, "my mother is sick and the healer is away. Amina has herbs that might help her. Can you go with me to ask her?" Cato frowned. "Ask her yourself," he said. But when Sephew explained how weak his mother was, Cato sighed and followed him. When they reached Amina's stall, she was mixing medicine for an old man. She smiled when she saw Sephew. "Your mother will be well," she said kindly, preparing a small bundle of herbs. Then she turned to Cato. "It is good to see you again, brother," she said softly. "Did you come to mock me again, or will you let me teach you something today?" Cato opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Her tone was not proud or mocking, it was kind, almost teasing. He looked away and said, "Just help his mother." She nodded and handed the herbs to Sephew, giving clear instructions. Cato watched her carefully, noticing how everyone trusted her. There was no fear in their eyes, only respect. As they left, Cato felt uneasy. He had always believed that strength made a person powerful. But now he saw another kind of strength, quiet, steady, and peaceful. Amina had something he didn't understand, something that made people listen without force. That night, Cato sat outside his hut again. The moon was full, and the sound of drums from the next village carried through the air. He thought about Amina's words, "Only a strong heart can lift a person." He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could not forget it either. In the following days, Amina continued her work. She visited homes, helped the sick, and taught the women how to make small gardens for medicine. Wherever she went, she brought hope. The children followed her with laughter, calling her Mama Amina. She told them that every person has light inside, but only those who choose peace can make it shine. Cato pretended not to care, but every day he found a reason to pass by the market. Sometimes he only looked from far away, pretending to buy something else. Amina always greeted him with a nod and a smile, never speaking of their first meeting. Slowly, his anger began to fade. For the first time in his life, Cato began to wonder if being feared was not the same as being respected. Watching Amina, he realized that her power came from helping others, not from controlling them. Her strength was quiet but unshakable, and it drew people to her like the morning sun draws flowers to open. Though Cato would never admit it aloud, He began to respect the woman he once mocked. He did not yet understand that Amina had come to Ndemu for a reason, not only to heal the sick but to heal a stubborn heart that had long been closed to love and wisdom. The sun rose high over Ndemu, lighting up the market with a golden glow. The air was filled with the smell of roasted maize, fresh fruits, and herbs. Women called out to buyers, children ran between stalls laughing, and the men bargained loudly for good prices. It was the busiest day of the week, and everyone was there. Everyone except Cato, who was sitting outside his hut, watching the road with narrowed eyes. For days, he had heard people talking about Amina. How kind she was, how wise she sounded, how she healed the sick. It annoyed him deeply. Once, he was the man everyone talked about, the one people feared and obeyed. Now, all anyone spoke of was Amina. It made his pride burn inside him like fire. "She thinks she can come here and change things," he muttered to himself. "Let her learn that this village already has a man who cannot be challenged." Cato stood up and began walking toward the market. The dust rose behind his heavy steps. As he entered, people grew quiet. They all knew Cato's temper and wondered what would happen. Some of the women whispered to Amina, who was sitting under her mango tree, selling herbs and oils as usual. "Cato is coming," one of them said nervously. "He looks angry." Amina smiled softly and said, "Let him come. Anger cannot harm the truth." Cato pushed through the small crowd and stood in front of her. "So, healer," he said loudly, "you think your kind words and small bottles make you wise? These people are foolish to follow you." The crowd went silent. Only the sound of a distant drum could be heard from across the river. Amina looked up at Cato. Her eyes were calm and clear. "I do not make anyone follow me," she said gently. "They come because they see hope." Cato laughed. "Hope? What can a woman know about hope? A woman should cook and clean, not fill people's heads with soft words." A few men in the crowd looked down in shame. The women frowned but stayed quiet. They had seen Cato's anger before. He waited for Amina to shout back, to argue or run away. But she did none of those things. Instead, Amina rose slowly to her feet. She was not tall, but when she stood, there was something powerful about her, not in her body, but in her spirit. She faced Cato and spoke in a steady voice. "A strong man does not raise his hand," she said. "He raises his heart." Her words were simple, yet they fell on the market like thunder. The people looked at her, then at Cato. For the first time, he had no reply. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. The crowd began to murmur softly. "She is right," said an old woman. "Real strength is not in shouting." Another said, "Amina speaks with wisdom." The more they spoke, the smaller Cato felt. He tried to laugh again, but it came out weak and empty. "You talk like the elders," he said finally, his voice shaking slightly. "But words do not plant crops or lift stones." Amina smiled gently. "That is true," she said. "But words can lift hearts, and lifted hearts can move mountains." The people nodded, some clapping quietly. Cato felt heat rise to his face. He looked around and saw that no one was afraid of him anymore, not even the women who once trembled when he shouted. They were looking at him differently now, not with fear, but with disappointment. Cato turned away quickly and walked out of the market, his chest tight and his mind confused. He had come to make Amina look small, but instead, she had made him feel smaller than he had ever been. As he walked home, he could still hear her words in his head. "A strong man does not raise his hand, he raises his heart." What did that even mean? He wondered. Was she calling him weak? Was she saying he had no heart? He clenched his fists as he walked, angry not just at her but at himself. For the first time, words had wounded him more deeply than any blow. That night, Cato could not sleep. He sat by his fire, staring into the flames. The villagers' whispers still echoed in his mind. "She is right, she is wise. Cato has met his match." He threw a stick into the fire and muttered, "Let them talk. What do they know?" But even as he said it, a small voice inside him whispered, she was not wrong. The next morning, when Cato went to fetch water, he saw two young boys trying to lift a heavy basket of cassava. They struggled and laughed but couldn't move it far. Normally, Cato would have walked past, pretending not to care. But something stopped him. He walked over and said, "Let me help." The boys looked surprised but nodded. Together, they lifted the basket. When they thanked him, Cato felt something strange, a quiet warmth that filled his chest. As he walked back to his hut, he realized it was the first time in a long while that he had helped someone without expecting anything in return. He remembered Amina's words again, softer this time, "He raises his heart." Maybe strength was not only in arms or voice. Maybe it was in kindness too. Still, his pride would not let him admit it. He told himself he was only helping because it was easy, not because of what Amina had said. But deep inside, a small change had begun. A few days later, he saw Amina again at the market. He wanted to ignore her, but she turned to him with that same calm smile. "Good morning, Cato," she said. "How is your day?" Cato hesitated. Normally, he would have walked away or answered with a harsh word. But this time, he only said, "It is fine." Amina nodded and went back to her work, grinding herbs and speaking kindly to the people. Cato stood watching her for a moment. He noticed how the villagers listened when she spoke, not out of fear, but because they truly cared. He realized that she led them not by shouting but by showing kindness. Later that day, an old man came to Cato's hut asking for help repairing his fence. Cato almost refused, but then he thought of how the people had helped him once when his own roof was damaged. He picked up his tools and went along. They worked quietly together, and when they finished, the old man smiled and said, "Thank you, Cato. You are stronger than I thought, not just in body, but here." He tapped his chest. That night, Cato sat outside, listening to the crickets. He looked up at the stars and thought of the day in the market when Amina's words had silenced him. He still did not understand everything, but he knew one thing: she was not like anyone he had ever met. She had faced his anger with peace and turned his pride into thought. The next morning, when Cato passed through the market, he greeted people softly. Some were surprised, others smiled. When he saw Amina again, he did not speak, but he nodded. She smiled back, and that small gesture felt like a quiet truce. The people of Ndemu began to whisper again, but this time their words were kind. "Maybe Cato is changing," they said. "Maybe her words have touched him." Cato pretended not to hear, but in his heart, he knew it was true. For the first time, he understood that being feared was not the same as being respected, and that the loudest man is not always the strongest. Amina had not fought him with fists or shouted to prove her point. She had simply spoken truth, and the truth had done what anger never could. And though Cato still carried his pride, he also carried her words with him, like a seed waiting to grow in the soil of his heart. A few weeks after the market incident, the sky over Ndemu grew heavy and strange. The birds stopped singing in the mornings, and a thick fog rested over the fields. People said it was a warning from the spirits. No one knew what was coming until the first person fell sick. It started with a fever, then coughing, then weakness that made it hard for people to stand. Soon, the illness spread from one hut to another, moving through the village like a slow wind no one could stop. The laughter in Ndemu disappeared. The once busy market became quiet. Women stopped trading, men stayed in their homes, and children no longer played outside. Every morning, people woke up afraid, wondering who would fall ill next. The old healer, Baba Nuru, did his best, but his herbs did not work against the sickness. His hands trembled with worry as he told the villagers, "I have not seen this kind of illness before." In the middle of all this, Amina stayed calm. She went from house to house, checking on families, bringing herbs, and giving water to the weak. Her voice was always gentle, her words full of hope. "Do not fear," she told them. "Nature gives us medicine for every sickness. We only need to look closely and trust." Some nights, she did not sleep. She worked by the firelight, crushing leaves, boiling roots, and making mixtures that could ease pain. The smell of herbs filled her small hut. People began to come to her for help, and she never turned anyone away. Cato watched all of this from a distance. He saw her walking in the rain to visit the sick. He saw her carrying small pots of medicine, even when she was tired. The villagers whispered that Amina was the reason many were still alive. But Cato did not go near her. Pride still sat in his heart like a stone, though something inside him had begun to soften. Then one morning, he woke to find his mother coughing weakly. She could hardly breathe. Cato's heart filled with fear. He had seen this sickness take others, and now it had come to his own home. He tried to feed her, but she could not eat. He boiled water, but it did not help. For the first time in his life, Cato felt helpless. The man who always believed he could control everything now stood powerless before what he could not fight. His mind turned to Amina, but his pride stopped him. He told himself, "I can care for my mother. I don't need her help." But by the second day, his mother's breathing grew worse. Her skin burned with fever, and she whispered weakly, "My son, go to the healer." Cato hesitated, his hands shaking. Finally, he ran out of the hut and into the village. The road felt long and heavy under his feet. When he reached Amina's home, he stopped outside for a moment, trying to catch his breath. Then, swallowing his pride, he knocked on her door. Amina opened it. She looked tired, with herbs in her hands, but her eyes were still calm. "Cato," she said softly, "I was waiting for you." He looked surprised. "Waiting for me?" he asked. She nodded. "Your mother has been on my mind. I knew you would come." Cato lowered his eyes. "She is sick, very sick. Please, help her." His voice broke as he spoke. It was the first time anyone had heard him speak with humility. Amina smiled gently. "You did well to come," she said. "Love is the first medicine." She gathered some bottles and leaves into a basket and followed him back to his hut. When they arrived, Cato's mother lay weak on her mat. Her eyes opened slowly when Amina entered. "Do not worry, Mama," Amina said softly. "You will get better." She mixed a drink of warm herbs and gave it to her. Then she placed a cool cloth on her forehead and sat beside her through the night. Cato watched as Amina worked, her hands steady, her movements kind. She spoke softly to his mother, humming an old song that seemed to carry peace into the room. Hours passed, and slowly, the old woman's breathing became easier. By morning, the fever had gone down. She slept soundly for the first time in days. Cato could hardly believe what he saw. He looked at Amina, who was sitting quietly by the fire, her eyes heavy with sleep. "You saved her," he whispered. Amina shook her head. "No, Cato. Love saved her. Healing comes faster when the heart is cared for." He wanted to speak but could not find the words. He had insulted her, mocked her, and yet she had come to help him without hesitation. Shame filled his chest. He remembered all the cruel things he had said, all the times he had looked down on her. Now she sat in his hut, saving the person he loved most. When his mother woke, she reached for Amina's hand and smiled weakly. "Thank you, my daughter," she said. "May the ancestors bless your hands." Amina smiled back. "Your blessings are enough," she replied. After his mother had eaten and gone back to sleep, Cato stepped outside with Amina. The morning sun was rising, painting the sky with colors of gold and red. He stood silently for a while before speaking. "I have been a fool," he said finally. "I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. I thought strength was in shouting, but you showed me it is in caring." Amina looked at him gently. "Everyone learns at their own time," she said. "The hardest lesson is not with the hands, but with the heart." He nodded slowly. "You have done so much for the village, for my mother, for me. I don't know how to thank you." Amina turned to him and said softly, "Respect grows where kindness is planted. If you wish to thank me, then plant kindness wherever you go." Her words sank deep into Cato's heart. He realized they were not just for him but for everyone. Kindness, he understood, was a seed, small but powerful, able to grow even in the hardest soil. As days passed, Amina's medicine helped more people recover. Slowly, the sickness began to fade from Ndemu. The villagers returned to the fields, the market came alive again, and laughter filled the air once more. Everyone praised Amina for her bravery and wisdom. Children ran after her, calling her Mama Amina, and women sang songs in her honor. Cato, too, changed in ways that surprised everyone. He began helping others without being asked. He carried water for the old, fixed fences for his neighbors, and even helped rebuild the small hut of a widow whose husband had died. When people thanked him, he simply smiled and said, Respect grows where kindness is planted. The villagers noticed the difference. Cato is no longer the man he used to be, they said. The fire in his heart has become light instead of smoke. The elders nodded in approval, saying, "The proud man has learned humility, and that is a blessing to all." One evening, Cato went to visit Amina at her hut. She was sitting outside, weaving a mat. "You have changed our village," he told her. "You have changed me." Amina smiled without looking up. "No, Cato," she said. "You changed yourself. I only reminded you of what was already in your heart." Cato stood quietly for a moment, then said, "Thank you." Amina looked up at him and smiled again, her eyes shining in the light of the fire. "Then thank the spirits too," she said, "for they never send a lesson without a reason." And as the night grew calm, with crickets singing in the grass and the moon shining over the village, Cato realized that the illness had not only healed the bodies of Ndemu, it had also healed his heart. From that day, Cato was not the same man anymore. The change did not come all at once, but little by little, like the sunrise breaking through the dark. The people of Ndemu began to notice small things first. The man who once walked through the market with a hard face now smiled at people as he passed. The man who once shouted at women now greeted them with respect. Even the children, who used to hide behind their mothers when they saw him, began to wave and laugh when he came near. Cato had become a different person, though he himself could hardly believe it. Each morning, he woke early to fetch water for his mother and help the elders who could not walk far. When he passed by the fields, he stopped to lend a hand to the farmers, lifting heavy baskets or fixing broken fences. People were surprised, and at first, they thought it would not last. But the days turned into weeks, and Cato continued to work with a humble heart. He often visited Amina, who was still caring for the sick and teaching the women how to make medicine. He helped her collect herbs from the forest, carrying the baskets and listening to her speak about healing and patience. Sometimes she would tell him, "Healing is not only for the body, Cato. It is also for the soul." He would nod and listen quietly, knowing her words were true. One afternoon, Amina and Cato went together to a nearby hill to gather a rare plant used to cure coughs. As they climbed, Cato stopped for a moment and looked down at the village below. The huts shone softly in the sunlight, and the fields stretched wide and green. "I used to look at this village with anger," he said. "I thought everyone was against me. Now I see it was my own heart that was closed." Amina smiled and replied, "When the eyes of the heart open, even the smallest place becomes beautiful." He smiled too. "You always have a way with words," he said. "Maybe that is why people listen to you." Amina laughed gently. "People listen because they can feel truth. Truth has no loud voice. It speaks quietly, like the wind in the grass." From that day, Cato began to speak with calmness too. When others argued in the marketplace, he was the one who stepped in to make peace. When two farmers fought over land, he listened to both sides and helped them find a fair answer. People began to trust him again. Some even came to ask for his advice. The same man who was once feared now became the man people turned to for wisdom. One day, the village chief sent for Cato. When Cato arrived, the chief smiled and said, "Cato, you have changed more than any man I have seen. There was a time we feared your anger, but now we respect your heart. Tell me, what brought this change?" Cato thought for a moment before answering. "Pain," he said quietly. "Pain and kindness. I thought strength meant power, but Amina showed me that true strength means care. When my mother was sick, I saw what love can do. Since then, I have tried to live by that lesson." The chief nodded. "Then you have become a man in the truest sense. A man who protects, not one who destroys." The villagers later gathered under the big baobab tree to celebrate the end of the sickness and give thanks for their health. There was music, laughter, and food. For the first time in many seasons, joy filled the air. Amina sat beside the fire, smiling as the children danced. Cato stood nearby, watching the people he had once frightened now dancing freely in peace. A young boy ran to him and tugged at his hand. "Uncle Cato," the boy said, "come dance with us." Cato laughed. "I am too old for dancing," he said. The boy shook his head. "No one is too old for happiness." The crowd laughed, and soon Cato found himself joining the dance. His heavy steps made the ground shake, and the people cheered. For the first time in a long time, his laughter came freely. It was not the laughter of pride but of peace. Later that night, after the feast had ended, Cato walked Amina home. The moonlight shone on the path, and the air was cool and quiet. "You have given me back my life," he said softly. "Before you came, I was lost in my own pride. Now I understand what it means to live for others." Amina looked up at the moon. "You gave yourself back your life, Cato," she said. "Every person has a choice. Some choose anger, others choose peace. You chose peace." He nodded, grateful for her words. "Then I will keep choosing it," he said. From then on, Cato became known not for his strength of body but for his strength of heart. Whenever there was trouble in the village, he was the first to help. When someone fell ill, he carried medicine from Amina's hut. When a child cried, he comforted them. When strangers passed through Ndemu, he welcomed them and shared food. People began to say, "If you want to see what change looks like, look at Cato." Even Baba Nuru, the old healer, smiled whenever he saw him. "The spirits have truly touched you," he said one day. "The man who once broke peace now builds it. The gods must be pleased." Years went by, and Ndemu grew stronger and happier. The fields produced plenty, the children grew healthy, and peace filled the air. Cato's mother lived to see her son become the man she always hoped he would be. Often she would tell the young ones, "My son once had hands that hurt, but now his hands heal. Remember, no heart is too hard for change." Amina continued her work in the village. She taught the people how to care for the land, the body, and the spirit. Cato stood beside her through every challenge, helping where he could. Together, they made Ndemu a place where kindness ruled and where no one lived in fear. One quiet evening, Cato sat under the baobab tree watching the sunset. The orange light spread across the fields, touching every hut with warmth. Amina joined him and sat down. "Do you ever miss the old days?" she asked gently. Cato shook his head. "No," he said. "Those days were full of pride and noise. My heart was like a closed drum. Now it is open. I finally understand what peace feels like." Amina smiled. "Then you have learned the greatest lesson of all. Peace begins inside." They sat quietly as the sky turned dark and the stars appeared. The sounds of laughter floated from the village. Somewhere, a mother sang her child to sleep. Cato listened and felt grateful for everything, for the village, for Amina, for the lesson that had changed him forever. The next morning, when he walked through Ndemu, people greeted him warmly. "Good morning, Cato," they said. "May your heart stay strong." And he would reply, "May yours stay kind." No one called him the stubborn man anymore. They called him Cato the Wise, or Cato the Peacemaker. And though he never sought praise, their respect filled him with quiet joy. The man who once ruled by fear now led with peace. His story became a lesson for the children of Ndemu, a story told under the moonlight for generations to come, reminding everyone that no matter how proud or stubborn a person may be, there is always a path back to goodness. And so, in the gentle rhythm of life in Ndemu, Cato's name was remembered not for his anger, but for his kindness, and the way he taught everyone that true strength comes not from power, but from the heart.